folks, welcome to another Besides the On podcast. We have a highly experienced Mountie on here today, which is very, very appreciated. Thank you for coming on, Michel. How are you doing?
Going well.
We had a bit of a chat before. The Scottish accent is going to be a bit of a pain in the ass for you a little bit, yeah?
Well, so far so good. Because if you
Yeah.
keep it that slow, it will be okay.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to calm everything down for you. Should be absolutely fine. Usually I get my guests to introduce themselves. Can you introduce yourself, Michel?
Sure. My name is Michel Funicelli. I'm a French, Italian, Canadian. So basically, just quickly, I am a retired police officer with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, having served over 3 decades in operational service throughout the country. And then I took up employment into teaching. And all the while, I completed a master's degree and a PhD in experimental psychology.
Awesome, that's perfect. So what I'll do is I have a little bit of a timeline and notes written down here, so we'll just go through these things as they go. So I wanted to ask what it was like growing up in Canada. Like, where were you born and stuff like that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's fairly simple. I was born in Montreal, born and raised in Montreal, from an Italian background and a French background. So that's where the Latin mix comes from. But then I did all my schooling here, and then I applied to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, and I was hired. And from that, in my mid-20s, I was sent to the RCMP Academy, located in Regina, Saskatchewan. For those who have never been to Canada, the province of Saskatchewan is roughly somewhere around the middle of the country, between the east and west coast. So where I spent 6 months at the police academy there, and afterwards I was transferred to the Vancouver, British Columbia area. And then I began my policing career in Richmond, British Columbia. And eventually I got transferred back to the province of Quebec, and where I finished my career in Montreal.
Awesome. Is there anything from childhood that sparked your interest into being a Mountie?
Um, from my no, not necessarily from my childhood. I wanted to be a police officer, and I thought in those days I had this image that the mounted police was the best police force in Canada. So fairly early on in my adulthood, I had decided that if I was going to apply to a police force, I'd rather start from at the top in terms of quality, and that's where I applied I applied there, and I was accepted.
Could you break down as well, like, how many police forces are there in Canada?
Okay, sure. Yeah, for your audience in Great Britain or Europe, whoever's listening, Canada is Canada has a national police force, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but the RCMP has several roles. It acts as the federal police, similar to what the FBI does in the United States. Secondly, it has a contract component. So, in other words, I'll try to give you an analogy with Great Britain, England. Suppose that you had an FBI type of police throughout England, and suppose that the city of London wanted their own police force, or wanted rather this national or FBI type of police. They wanted that that police force to patrol and police the city of London. So the civic government of London would contract out their policing services with this FBI type. So in other words, putting it back to Canada, so the RCMP contracts to 8 out of 10 provinces. Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories. So the RCMP acts as the provincial police, or in American terms, the state police, in 8 out of 10 of the Canadian provinces, and in the northern territories as well. So we act, the RCMP acts as the first responders. And also it's taken on several municipal contracts. So let's say that folks may know the city of Toronto very well, which is not the Toronto has its own municipal police force, but other cities across the country have opted to obtain a contract, or to ask the RCMP to come and do the policing in their own city. So it's kind of a hodgepodge situation, and whoever has not entered into a contract with the RCMP, well, basically they've had to establish their own provincial police, their own municipal police. So that's roughly the landscape in terms of policing in Canada.
I know you said you were excited to actually join the RCMP as well at the beginning. Did you have any reservations as well as that going in?
No, not really. If I was to do it all over again, I'd do it again. Same thing. What I liked about the RCMP is that it allowed me to travel and see the country, and it allowed me to gain a vast experience in aspects of policing that I don't think I would have been able to gain in other police forces. One idiosyncrasy of the RCMP is that even as a patrol officer, driving a police car and walking the beat, an RCMP officer is instantly a patrolman or patrol officer, as well as an investigator. So in other words, contrary to other large municipalities or cities around North America, where a patrol officer attends a service for a call for service, attends a robbery, a domestic dispute. If there is to be an investigation to be done, that patrol officer turns it over to detectives. Well, within the RCMP, a patrol officer responds to the call for service and begins right there an investigation. So we RCMP members are investigators from the get-go. So that's a clear distinction from other police services.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask as well, what were some of the most challenging aspects of the training?
Oh, the training?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. In my case, it was. I would have to say that the biggest challenge I faced was the physical training. I was at university, and when I applied, and I just finished my first undergraduate degree, so I was basically a bit of a nerd, and so I had to work double hard to make up for where I was lacking. But the training has evolved, or the mentality of the training has evolved quite a bit when I joined a few decades ago, in the sense that prior to the 1980s, the training was focused more on physical strength, brute strength. But with the arrival of for starters, with the arrival of females in the RCMP, they were accepted in 1974, I believe. So with the arrival of female members, and also smaller males or males of smaller stature, they had to change the training towards a greater endurance,
Yeah.
greater physical endurance rather than brute strength. So that fit my. I'm not very big. I'm only 5'8". So in beforehand, on there were height limits, but where there are no height limits anymore. So anyway, that to answer your question, that was the physical challenge.
Yeah. Did you there was a recent news article that came out about talking about jujitsu.
Oh,
Um,
no, no, we did have training in the martial arts,
yeah.
a few moves of karate and judo, but not not very extensive. And the reason is simple. The reason is that I'm not a martial art expert, but anybody who is listening will know well that if you want to maintain your expertise, your in either karate or judo, it's something that you need to continue and practice for hours and hours and hours. And sadly, it's not something that fits well within a policing context unless you want to do it on your own. But so it's a bit of a it would be a bit of a waste of time to train someone in a particular martial art at the police academy, because afterwards there's a great likelihood that the police officer will not keep his or her training to that level. So, but basically the techniques are the techniques that we were taught at the time were really were techniques that could be applied with a minimum amount of training, in the sense so that you would not need to practice your these moves to get yourself out of a bad situation.
So we concentrated a bit on the sort of most difficult parts of training and stuff. But what about your most fun or the most enjoyable parts of training?
The most enjoyable part, uh, I would have to, I would have to say, okay, I would have to say probably the driving experience, the driving techniques that we were taught, overtaking vehicles. There was a training on there's a circuit at the academy where where you can perform specific vehicle moves to avoid either a vehicle, to overtake someone, or to chase another vehicle. So that I had never been exposed to before. The rest, I mean, the rest, I was. I had already started an academic life, so to me, the academic aspect was second nature, as well as the paramilitary aspect, the foot drill, because I have a background in. I was a an officer in the Canadian Army before joining the mounted police. So the militaristic type of training did not bother me at all, because I had gone through that beforehand. So and as far as in Canada, police officers are armed, so the training with a sidearm, to me, that was not also second nature because of my prior military experience. So frankly, it was left to basically the driving techniques that I had never been exposed to, that I found interesting.
Yeah, there was I was watching a documentary earlier, and they were talking about like the graduation. There's like a few old school traditions that they do on like the passing out. Could you talk about a bit about that? They said they weren't allowed to film a lot of the things. Are you allowed to talk about some of the things that happen?
if I'm allowed to talk, well, yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I understood your question
Okay.
quite clearly. You mentioned something about traditions that.
Yeah, there was like a ceremonial thing that happened. Everybody was drinking wine, all
At
those
the
things.
graduation, you mean?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yes, that was that was a quite of an interesting. I'm glad you mentioned you brought that up because in terms of souvenir, well, that's one that stands out in my head. And basically, for folks listening, uh, um, I'll try to I'll try to describe it as best as I can, but it's the graduation ceremony is all done by moves of foot drill. But we were a group, a class of 32 members, and there's a reason why there's a reason for that number. But anyway, it makes it easy for to configure different shapes as the parade is carried on or carried out. And but one interesting characteristic of those of that graduation ceremony is that there are no voice commands. You know, people have seen in the movies where the drill sergeant barks out orders, and everybody stands at attention, and so everybody's aware, everybody's accustomed to hearing that. But in this case, it was all we performed the ceremony lasted about from memory probably a good 30 to 40 minutes, if my memory is well. But 30 or 40 minutes of this group, if people can imagine a troop of a group of 32 men at the time, performing various shapes like crisscrossing and then around in an indoor parade square. But all these moves, as one has to go to the left and the other one splits off to the left and the right, and we regroup in this to the center. All these moves are done silently. So in other words, everybody has to remember to silently count the number of steps, the number of seconds that lapses between one move to another, so that everything is done without any commands. So of course, you can imagine that we did not perform this overnight. We practiced and practiced and practiced, and basically adding one move after upon the next, and the next practice we added another move. But the key characteristic is that it was a silent parade ceremony, if I could say.
It was interesting because the way that they said on the documentary that it was years of tradition had set into these things, and it was interesting that they couldn't film any of it as well. They were just allowed to film the guys drinking wine. They didn't mention much about it either.
Oh, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but it was something. That your family is invited at the ceremony, so it's touching, and for those whose father or mother was an active police officer, the parent was allowed to hand out the police badge to their own child, daughter or son. But it was not my case. My father was an accountant, so so it was I received my badge from the police academy's commanding officer.
Right. So I want to ask, what is the stress like of not quite knowing if you're going to actually become a Mountie at the end of this? Like, were you aware maybe halfway through? Maybe somebody told you that you might make it, or like, did you know anything?
Yeah, sure. Well, certainly there's always that stress of not being able to make it. But we are we were assessed quite regularly. So we had lots of feedback. So we knew where our weak points, what our weak points were, and we were we were strongly suggested to by the instructors to improve and so some unfortunately some classes some candidates did not finish their training. Most of the time it was due to a physical injury, which is sad because you're in training and you're not supposed to it's sad when you have to quit training because of an accident, an injury occurring while training. So
so after training, what were your thoughts about joining the force? Like, were you looking forward to getting started? Did you again have any reservations after you'd done the training?
no, naturally, no. I was
No.
looking forward to working, and I was sent to. No, from what I should say is that at back in those years, um, we were assigned in different locations across the country. Canada is a large country, from it's spanning three oceans: the Arctic, and the Atlantic, and the Pacific. So it's a very large country, and so toward about the training lasted 6 months at the academy, and around the fifth month of training, we were advised of where our posting would be, our first posting would be, and mine was in the lower mainland of British Columbia, where the city of Vancouver is located on the Pacific coast, and that's where I began my policing career in a patrol car.
That was another interesting thing because they said that on the documentary. Again, all my knowledge is based on this documentary I watched, so pardon. They suggested that basically, if you want to become a Mountie, you basically have to then decide that they tell you where you're going to move a lot of the time.
Yeah, basically,
Is that
yes, that's correct. We were given, I believe, we were given three choices of provinces, and we were told at the time, back in those days, we were told that not to put down our home province. So I was born in the province of Quebec, where Montreal is situated. So I basically I was told that don't put that province down on in terms of your choices, because you will not receive the posting anywhere within your
okay?
home province. So I selected other provinces, and I was lucky enough to land in British Columbia on the Pacific West Coast.
That's great. That's great. Because I did wonder how likely it was that you'd end up in your own province, sort of thing. So there is ways around it in that
But I
sense.
mean, I should raise the caveat here that the the training and the human resources staffing situation that I'm discussing may have changed today in 2021. I'm talking 30 plus years ago, but not much has changed though. But some students or some graduating officers do end up back in their own province, um, which is okay. Everybody so the RCMP has grown to be much more cognizant of family issues, caring after maybe elderly parents, or having a sick sibling, or there are some serious situations, and the RCMP has improved quite a bit in that respect.
So a lot of us over here, again, uh, we have a very limited knowledge on the Canadian Mounties and stuff. Our assumption is that at the end of your training, you're given your firearm and I suppose a horse. Like, how true and ridiculous is that, really?
Well, the firearm is correct.
Okay.
The horse is not. I have never ridden a horse in my life.
See, again, that's a thing that everybody assumes, like because of Mounties and stuff like that. Again, a lot of
Sure.
the police over here that do ride horses are called mounted police. So people just assume automatically. Because we had a very silly question from someone earlier on. They were asking if it's even possible to ride an elk or a moose. Very
To
very
ride
silly
to
question.
ride an
To,
elk?
yeah, I think so. Someone asked that earlier if that was even possible.
Well,
Like, has it been tried?
I have never heard I have never heard of anyone trying to ride an elk.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Again,
never heard that.
silly questions from friends. So your first year on the force, how was it? Like, did you have obviously you had expectations going in? Did it reach your expectations? How was it after the first year?
Oh, the my first year actually, I was sent. Okay, you have to go back in time, because in 1986, no, rather in 1985, in around this June 1985, I think, was the largest uh, terrorist attack against Canadian citizens in the form of a plane that blew up over the Atlantic Ocean, and that was Air India. So, in that context, it's in that context that I was sent to my first posting. So people have to keep that in mind that Canada had just gone through a terrible terrorist attack where,
Was that immediately after you got out of training?
well, it occurred, the terrorist attack occurred before even I
Oh,
joined,
okay.
but the lasting effect of that terrorist attack lasted for many years,
Right.
because until such a time as the culprits were investigated, and eventually charged, identified and charged, which took many years. Well, the Canadian government had to respond to threats against the Indian population and diplomats. So because there was in those years there was a conflict occurring in India, where with splinter groups in India that wanted to achieve some political goal. But so in other words, the Canadian government had to ensure protection of the Indian embassy in Ottawa, the nation's capital, as well as all the consulates, the Indian consulates across the country. And that's where I landed in my first true posting, which was supposed to be temporary, but it lasted a good 6 months, where I was doing security at the Indian consulate in Vancouver. So it was a bit of a um, disappointment, because it was not the type of work that I was expecting to do after having gone through 6 months of training and having studied and obtained a bachelor's degree at university. And there my first posting was to do a physical security of a consulate. And so, but I'm glad I did it, and I'm also glad or happy that it only lasted 6 months, because I don't think I would have been. It's not my style of policing that I had envisaged. And afterwards, after I think it was 6 months that I performed those duties, that I was assigned to a more traditional police function that I was trained for.
It's a great eye opener as well, just to go from that expecting to jump into like complete action mode, and
Oh
then
yes,
it's just basically security for 6 months.
yes, exactly. I was for 6 months. I was basically a well-paid security guard.
Yeah,
Um, but I should mention also that if it's this is a good segue into the training,
yeah,
that the RCMP training to become a police officer with the RCMP is more than just then it involves more than just completing a 6 month uh, training at the police academy in Regina, Saskatchewan, because actually it's one full year, so it's 6 months at the police academy, followed by another 6 months of field training, where the junior officer or the recruit is teamed up with another teamed up with a senior officer, and for another 6 months, you're basically you're being mentored by the senior officer, and so you're putting in practice what you've learned at the academy for 6 months. But that was not open to me in my first posting at the as a security guard, so to speak. So that was not open to me, and that's what I was hoping to finish as soon as possible.
yeah.
So after that first initial posting with respect to the security at the Indian Embassy in Vancouver, I um, I was assigned to at a detachment in the city of Richmond, on the outskirts of Vancouver, and there I began my field training.
So my next question was, what are some of the bigger cases you were involved in? I know that's probably hard to think of straight off the top of your head, but
Well, throughout my 30-plus year career, uh,
yeah,
it, okay.
yeah.
Well, I would have to say two cases stand out. Two investigations stand out in my head. One was a homicide, and the other one was an organized crime investigation. And they're at almost at either end of my career. The homicide that I attended, um, where I played it was basically a woman that had been stabbed to death by a neighbor in a apartment building, and basically it was the first time where I played the role of a crime scene examiner. You people that are listening or watching, I've probably seen movies and TV shows about CSI attending a crime scene, and people the crime scene analyst wear the white bunny suits. So well, we myself and a colleague did that for the whole night. We examined this one bedroom flat thoroughly to collect all kinds of physical evidence, down to the fibers and hair, anything, and little spots of blood anywhere. So it was minutia was really important to be for that investigation. So that stands out in my mind and in memory to this day. The other investigation that stands out in my memory it occurred towards the latter end of my career, and it's when I was transferred back to Montreal in an anti-organized crime unit, and our mandate at the time was to tackle Italian organized crime. And we one criminal organization that our unit uh, tackled was uh, the family called the Rizzuto family. Now, the Rizzuto family had grown so powerful that it was nicknamed as the sixth family. And the reason why I say the sixth family is because people may I have to mention that in New York, the Italian mafia is principally made up of five large families: the Gambino for one, the Lucchese for another one, and I forget offhand the three others. But there are essentially five families that make up the Italian mafia in New York, and they're quite powerful. Well, the Rizzuto family in Montreal became so powerful that they were nicknamed as the sixth family. So in other words, they grew so powerful that they were able to achieve independence from one of the families. I think initially they were under the control of the Bonanno family in New York, but the Rizzuto clan grew so big and so powerful that they were able to gain gain their independence from that family in New York. But this was an investigation where I have to put it in perspective to your audience. It was a 6-year long investigation, and 6 years is a long time. And not every investigator is not necessarily able. I don't want to use that word, but it's not is. Some investigators like a short-term investigation that lasts maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, but it takes a lot of tenacity, focus, and perseverance to maintain your level of performance for 6 years.
Yeah.
So, but in that investigation, we eventually arrested over 100 individuals, but not after spending, like I said, 6 years of investigation and intercepting approximately 1.5 million private communication. And at that time in 2006 or 2008, we had accumulated more. We had intercepted more private communication than the FBI had ever intercepted in any of their investigations. So it's quite a feat for the RCMP to have done that. But we collected evidence from all kinds of sources, collecting evidence from video surveillance, audio surveillance, from human source information, from crime scene evidence. So we collected or also from our international partners as well. We collected evidence from our international partners. So it was a very widespread investigation. So that investigation stands out in my mind as well.
As when you think to like organised crime busts, these are one of the most annoying things because the police know they exist, the police know the gangs exist, but it's about you have to go to the point of like wiretapping and again, my experiences from movies and stuff, so like don't take anything I say into consideration, but yeah, it's just the amount of manpower and the amount of work that goes into these things, and a lot of it is just checking phone calls, listening to conversations.
Yes.
It's a constant boring a lot of the time, really.
Yes, it's a good point that you bring up because some people that are listening right now or watching the video may think that police investigation is much like CSI on TV, where the police comes into a room and collects the evidence, and they find a little bit of a DNA sample on a spot of blood, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, in real life, it does not happen this way, and not only that, but when you're dealing with organized crime, especially organized crime, the offense that you are likely to investigate is the crime of conspiracy. So, by definition, and I'm not sure what the Scottish law is, but it's probably similar to what Canada is. Um, but by definition, a conspiracy is where two or more people agree or come to an agreement to commit a crime. You and I engage into an agreement, arrive into an agreement to rob a bank. So you and I could be guilty or of doing conspiracy to commit a robbery. So for that kind of offense to occur, conspiracy, um, DNA samples don't mean much
Yeah.
because the key piece of evidence that is necessary to prove a conspiracy is the common accord between two or more individuals. So a drop of blood uh, left somewhere, while it may be good to for another type of crime, while it may be a good piece of evidence for another type of crime, it's almost useless to prove that two or more people entered into an agreement. So the technique to capture and collect this type of evidence is the interception of private communication. If you and I are calling each other, texting each other, sending each other emails, whatever medium of communication that you and I decide to take to arrive at our agreement to rob a bank, to kill someone. Well, that's what the police needs.
Yeah. It's great. It's highly interesting, those kind of things, because you assume that most like gangland things would end with like a death. Everybody's caught then, and then that's it done. But most of these things are actually caught due to communication issues between them a lot of the time.
Yes, absolutely.
That's it. That's it. So, just to move into your career a little bit further, you were going to retirement. Did you leave the force on like any bad terms, or were you just that was you finished?
Oh
That was
no,
you done?
I left on good terms.
Yeah.
I was almost finished with my PhD in psychology, and an opportunity came up to teach policing in Australia at Charles Sturt University in the state of New South Wales. And I jumped on the occasion, and decided to retire. And my wife and I moved to Australia.
Did that come up? Like, sorry, how did that come up? It's not usually like advertised in the paper, those kind of jobs.
No, but they're advertised on different various platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's it you're doing right now? It's like you're like from a psychology perspective, you're teaching policing, or is that what you're doing right now?
At the moment,
Yeah.
no. At the moment, I'm unemployed.
Okay.
My Because of the pandemic, my 2-year fixed term contract came to an end
Okay.
in December of last year, and
And is there no sign of you being able to go back?
well, Australia has not opened up their borders to foreigners yet.
Okay, right, okay. Because I know they were doing pretty well, like when it comes to the virus and stuff like that. I know most places were like open for even like gigs and stuff like that. Some music venues and stuff were open. Maybe not on a large scale, but I know they were doing pretty well. But I didn't know the borders were closed still. So
Well, yes, they are closed to
yeah,
they are closed to non-Australian citizens or permanent or people that are not permanent residents
Okay.
of Australia, and as of this day, and perhaps towards until the end of the year, 2021, that the borders will remain closed.
So you were doing your psychology degree,
Mhm.
sort of mostly through like how many years were you doing that while you were
Well,
working in the Mounties?
sure. Well, I studied once I finished my first undergraduate degree, which was done as a full time student. My next degrees were all done part time. So while I was working full time, I I was studying part time. So my second undergraduate degree in psychology, I did it by correspondence, and that took me 16 years to complete. And then I followed that. I followed it with a master's degree in psychology, which took me another 5 years, and my PhD, which I also did part time, took me about 8 years.
And again, psychology makes you kind of invaluable as a police officer a lot of the time as well, because you're having to break down people like during interrogations and stuff, which is a highly well. Again, my knowledge is not great, but can you explain that, like the interrogation styles and stuff?
Well, sure, but okay, I take um, I'd like to the word you use, like to break down people.
Yeah,
That word is misplaced because the that may have been the case many decades ago, where where police interrogators literally broke people down, but that's no longer the case. Actually the current or the current school of thought in terms of investigative interviewing is to develop a rapport with the person in front of you, the person that you're interviewing. So it's certainly not by breaking that person down that you will get anything anything significant out of that person. So basically, the current school of thought, like I said, is to develop a rapport, find something common but between yourself and the person that you're interviewing. Be compassionate. There's one study that stands out in my head. It's from one of the Scandinavian country, maybe Sweden. I remember reading that study where the researchers interviewed uh, inmates, and some of them were murderers, and some others were rapists. And they asked those offenders the question, what was significant. I should say that these offenders had confessed to their crimes. I should say that because and then the researchers asked those offenders, what was it that made you confess to your crime, either murder or sexual assault? And the common denominator of these offenders was that the police investigator that interviewed me, they were saying that the interviewer was very humane. So so it's it's a marked departure from the 1950s, the 1960s of undergoing of being given the third degree. I'm not sure if that's an expression that's used in Scotland.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The third degree.
yeah.
Well, that may have been the technique of the 1950s and 60s or and before, but it's certainly not the case in the latter half of the 20th century, and certainly not in the 21st century.
I watch a lot of. There's a YouTube channel called JCS Criminal Psychology. I don't know if
Okay.
he basically it talks about different interrogation. Like he'll take on an interrogation and talk about it, sort of in depth, talking about basically the things that you do. If you're able to tell if he's lying and all that kind of things. Is there any myths that you could break down? Because sometimes I think some of those videos can be full of shit. Just to be blunt, sometimes to be blunt a little bit. Is there any sort of things you could myth
Absolutely.
bust?
Now you're entering into my areas of expertise, which is lie detection. And if there is one myth that I'd like to dispel, is that some persons and mainly police and some police officers think they are walking human lie detectors. The scientific research could not be more convincing that police officers are no different than the average folk in terms of being able to determine if someone is lying or not. And basically, the rate of the performance is around chance. So what does that mean? It's like flipping a coin, and you get a 50% chance of getting it right or wrong. Well, that's where the literature tells us is that police officers are no different than your average person on the street, because determining whether someone is lying, and that performance level is at about chance 50. Sometimes it's below 50 or slightly above 50, 54, 55, but that's not great. But that's relying only on visual cues or maybe verbal cues. Now we could go on much further into lie detection, but I'll wait for your next question.
Well, again, one of the things that the guys keep saying on these videos is that again, you talked about there, they make out the policeman to be like some sort of superhero, that they're doing multiple things in the interview, and it's like there's only so much I think a human brain can process. Like, these guys are having to do 74 different things at once. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yes.
So what kind of things were you looking to expand on there?
Well, I've come to the conclusion that, well, first of all, detecting whether someone is lying is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. To do so and achieve a level of performance that is reasonably well, it needs you need the assistance. An interviewer would need the assistance of some technical instrument, and I'll just put aside the polygraph for a second. There's been research done with fMRIs. There's been research done with EEG, electroencephalogram. There's been other research done with electrooculograms, the movement of the eyes. There's been other research done with other instruments, including the polygraph. And I think what's important to remember is that none of these instruments by themselves can give you not even near close to a percentage, diagnostic accuracy of 100%, not even close. So I've come to the conclusion that because lie detection was so difficult, because you want to be sure at 100%, and if you're less than 90%, then it's you're in terms of policing and accusing someone of something, you're really in dangerous territory if whatever technique you're using falls below 90%, in my opinion. So I've become to believe that the technique of memory detection was more useful, was more effective. And what does memory detection mean? What does that mean? Well, actually, I have to give credit to an American researcher by the name of Dr. Lawrence Farwell, who, and also Dr. Peter Rosenfeld, another American. Dr. Rosenfeld, whom I've attended his laboratory in Chicago and learned a great deal from him, and who, by the way, I should mention, sadly passed away in February this year. But he was a great man, and the science will be he leaves a big hole in terms of science. But memory detection relies on the on one test more than the instrument. And the test in question is called a concealed information test. Now, the concealed information test is fairly easy to understand, and it can be used with a polygraph or with an electroencephalogram. So, in that sense, the concealed information test, which was discovered a few decades before, in 1959, by another American researcher by the name of David Lycan, from the University of Minnesota, I believe. David Lycan basically came up with this technique for the same reason that I don't believe that lie detection can be detected with the knowledge that we have in the 21st century. So him and a couple of medical students wanted to perform some experiments. They had a bit of time on their hand during one summer, and they sort of brainstormed the idea that since the lie detection was so difficult, what could they do to what kind of experiment could they develop? So they came up with the idea that, okay, we'll try to detect what's in the memory of the offender. So this is how the concealed information test works. It begins with the police or the authorities discovering one or several key piece of evidence from a crime scene or a crime situation. So let's take for instance the very simple scene of a homicide where a murder weapon is left at the scene of the crime. Let's say a handgun, or for argument's sake. So the handgun is the murder weapon, and it's left at the scene, and only the offender and the police know that. So the police would develop a concealed information test, and it functions this way. So if an offender is arrested, or a suspect is arrested for this offense, they would show him or her the murder weapon, so the handgun in this case, but also they would show neutral alternatives to this offender. So in other words, they would show that the person a knife, a baseball bat, a stick, a crowbar. So the person is exposed to the offender, or the true offender would be exposed to this piece of crucial evidence, the murder weapon. And what the examiner would do then is, depending on what kind of equipment the examiner is using, either a polygraph or an electroencephalogram, they would measure different physiological signals as the person is exposed to these stimuli. And anyway, to move fast forward to 2008, and Professor Rosenfeld from Northwestern University in Chicago developed a particular protocol whereby an offender would be shown on the computer screen this crucial piece of evidence, the handgun in our case, and assorted with other instruments that are likely to cause a homicide. and the person is attached with some electrodes on their scalp, and the brain waves of that person are analyzed as the person is shown these images on the computer screen. And there's a couple of other technical issues which I won't get in because it would take too much time. But there's a set of instructions that accompanies this presentation of stimuli, and they're shown only for very few short seconds. And while the electrical activity in the brain is measured. So the analysis of a particular brainwave is measured, and that's it's called the P300 brainwave. The P300 brainwave, P300 means P for positive, as opposed to negative in electrical terms. So it means there's a positive deflection on a graph. There's a positive deflection that occurs at approximately 300 to 600 or 700 milliseconds after a person is shown the stimuli. And it's at that point that the examiner measures the difference of amplitudes in microvolts, that measures the difference in amplitudes between when a person is shown this murder weapon versus the other neutral alternatives, the bat and the knife, whatever. So it's a difference, and it's been shown that this brainwave is a reliable index of memory recognition. So right now, the stage of where the science is at, many laboratory experiments have been conducted, mainly at Dr. Rosenfeld's laboratory in Chicago, and it's been shown to be quite reliable. And I have to say that part of my PhD research was to validate independently Dr. Rosenfeld's protocol, and we were able to successfully replicate his protocol, which I'm quite glad, because we became the second group of researchers in the world to do so. The first one being a group led by Dr. Lukács in Eastern Europe at the time. So we became Dr. Lukács and his team and myself became the two independent teams of researchers to ever validate independently Dr. Rosenfeld's protocol. There's another protocol that's also in existence, but we probably don't have time to. But it works under the same principle. It's just there's some variations in terms of the mechanics of doing the test, but the same principle. It's the same principle. It's analyzing the brainwave and analyzing the amplitude difference. But it's been shown in laboratory studies anyway to be quite reliable, and I look forward to the day where I can resume my research activities and maybe move on to conduct field studies.
Definitely. I only have a couple of questions left for you. A question from a friend of mine earlier on. Is it so? This is a bit of a long-winded question. I will try and break it down for you. Is it more difficult or impossible to detect a lie when someone is foreign to you or talking with an accent different to your own?
Well,
like in this situation.
Yeah, certainly. I've answered that question partially in a previous response. That lie detection using verbal and nonverbal signals as a cue to detect a deception or not. Now, the question is about whether it's more difficult or not, depending on the accent. Yeah. I'll try to answer this with another by describing briefly another technique of lie detection, which is called it's basically the analysis of verbal content, but it does not necessarily apply to verbal contents that is shared viva voce, like you and I are having a conversation. That technique is more applicable to a verbal statement that is put in writing, and that's where the analysis comes from, is the written format of that verbal conversation. So in that sense, having an accent or no accent is irrelevant, because what the person who is applying the technique is trying to do is analyzing the written format, and analyzing some keywords, whether the person is, whether the usage of some keywords or not, and trying to determine whether the person is being deceptive in that fashion. So, and having an accent or no accent actually plays no role.
That's cool. That's cool. The final question, Michel. I'll let you go right after this. What do you wish the public knew about cops?
Say that again.
What do you wish the public knew about cops?
Oh, what do I wish the public knew about cops?
Yeah.
Okay, that we are human beings. Right now, at this moment, policing in North America. I'll stick to North America because I know the situation more or even better than what it is probably in the UK at the moment. But policing in America is undergoing a lot of strain. And what I wish the public would know about cops is that we are human, and we the police community often gets stereotyped by the actions of a very few group of police officers who act outside of the limits of reasonableness, and outside of sometimes of legal limits, as we have seen in recent weeks in the United States, with especially the recent conviction of the officer Derek Chauvin in America, with the death of George Floyd, and that leads to movement of defunding the police, and even in Canada, we've begun seeing those type of movements take place, and I think that it's sad. I think that the policing community needs to have a deep look at itself in terms of a profession, because there used to be a day where the word of a police officer was golden in terms of credibility. Well, I'm sad to say that I don't believe that it is the case anymore, simply by seeing the growth of body cameras that's growing exponentially. Which means something to me, is that a police officer's word is less taken, or it cannot be taken at its face to be true, simply because it has to be corroborated by a body worn camera. So there are pros and cons to that. I have no negative opinion about that, but basically, it's what I'd like the public to know is that generally speaking, police officers are just like nurses and social workers. We want to do good. We have a deep sense of justice. I think I speak for many, that many police officers join a police force of whatever jurisdiction to as their civic contribution to social justice. As simple as that. It's our public contribution to make sure that we can live safely in a democratic society, and that's, I think, goes for the great majority of men and women who wear the uniform.
There you go. Well, thank you, Michel, for joining us. It's been highly, highly appreciated.
Well, great. Thanks for having me.
Much thanks. No problem at all. No problem at all.